Hello, I'm Robin Vincent and welcome to Surface Sessions. Today we're looking at Native Instruments TRK-01 running on the Surface Pro 4. TRK-01 is kind of a two-channel drum machine groove box thingy. It's a Reactor instrument which will run in Reactor Player, in the Complete Control software, or in Reactor 6 all by itself. It features just two things. It features a kick drum and a bass line. A kick drum and a bass line. Just kick, just bass, and a sequencer to make it all happen. That's it. It's a completely self-contained little groove machine with a surprising amount of limitation and yet an awesome amount of synthesis. And it's almost perfectly built for the Surface Pro 4. With a little bit of scaling magic, you can make it fill the entire screen. It's very touch responsive to a single finger, but that's all right. And it runs completely solidly at about 20% CPU. Now my Surface Pro 4 here is the 2017 version, the current one, with an i5 processor, 8 gigs of RAM and 256 gigabytes of storage. It's that one. It's the middle one. It's the fanless one. So, you know, fair to middle in performance, that kind of thing. But the TRK-01 works on it beautifully, perfectly, you can say. And with the use of a bit of a finger or a bit of a pen, you can play to your heart's content without ever having to touch a mouse. So you can put it on your lap, take it on the bus, do what you like, or sit in your studio and just play with kick, with bass, with TRK-01. Sounds a bit like this. Or like this. Or like this. Or like this. Or something like that. So let me drag you in to have a little bit of a poke around and see what it's made of. So what's it all about? Well, on one side over here you have the kick drum section, and then on the side over here you've got the bass line section. This bit in the middle is just beautiful throughout, showing you what the heck is going on with your waveform or with the LFO or whatever it is that's currently in focus, if you like, appears here. It's just really nice. At the bottom is your sequencing section, 16 steps as you can see, which you can put in things or not put in things. And when you've got kick selected, you've got a little bit of the bass line at the top. When you've got bass selected, you've got the kick at the top. So you can always see what's going on. TRK-01 keeps everything sort of desperately limited. You've got 8 sounds that you can select and swap between. You've got 8 patterns that you can swap between. You've got 16 steps going up to 4 pages of 64 steps. It's not giving you the world. It's just giving you a handful of bits and pieces to play with. And that, in essence, is why this is really quite intoxicating, because you are working within the limitations of what it's offering you. But what it's offering you is pretty flippin' awesome. So let's initiate. Start off with something simple and have a look at what is possible. So let's concentrate on the kick over here. I've got 2 kicks going. Let's set it running. There you go. That's a kick. Now over here is the kick side of things. You have at the top here, and it's mirrored really on the bass side as well. You have the main parameters at the top. In the middle is what the heck is going on, and at the bottom is modulation. With the kick drum, you have 2 layers, which we'll come to in a minute. We're just going to concentrate on layer A. This is our current sound that you can hear. There's 4 different types of sound generation on the kick side of things. You've got sample, which is what this is. You've got synth. You've got rumble. And you've got noise. Let's go back to sample for a minute. You've got different categories of sample. like acoustic, digital, analog, sub, drums, whatever that is, and effects. And then you can choose a sample within that category. You can choose start and end points if it's a sample, and you can tune it up and down. You can drop your own samples in as well. Literally just drag and drop your own stuff in and you can use that as your sound source. Synth then is just a wave, starting with a sine wave going up to something more interesting. You could tune that as well, down or up. Or you can add some buzz, which sticks in some extra kind of harmonics and a bit of click, which I don't particularly like, but there we go. On this side, you've now got a pitch envelope. If you want to use it. Rumble, as I understand it, is a sine wave infused with noise, and you can mess that about as well with a bit of chaos, or bring it back, make it move about a bit more, and again you've got the pitch envelope. Noise then is noise as you'd expect it to be. You can change the shape of that, something a bit more violent, down to something a bit more usual, or just light, a little bit of noise. A lot of noise, a little bit of noise, a little bit of noise, a lot of noise. And over all of this you have an envelope down here. Which can make things interesting. And you also have a filter built into each layer as well. So I'm going to up the resonance, bring that down. Or I can make it a high pass filter, which for noise might be more interesting. Gives me something in the high end. But isn't this supposed to be about kicks? Well, yes it is, but there's no reason why you can't modify that to be something else. For instance, if you go back to the samples, go back to the drum category, you have all sorts of things in here, like claps and hi-hats and other sounds. So what becomes apparent as you start to use the kick side of this is that, yeah, it's focused on kicks, but it doesn't have to be about that. And actually that starts getting interesting when you introduce the second layer. Let's put this back to synth for a moment. Come to layer B. On this knob here, you mix between the two. So there's layer B, layer A. Or a mix between the two. Now, layer A and layer B are identical. They do the same stuff. So on layer B, for instance, I could choose some noise, stick that in there. And that could make for an interesting kick. But also, if I automate this particular knob, I can swap between the kick and the other sound. So what I could do in my sequencer down here is stick in a couple more notes. And then there's this feature called lock. If you tap on lock, then anything you do only happens to that step. So for this step, I'm going to make it layer B only. This one as well. So now you can see that using these two layers together, I can actually produce kind of two tracks of drums within the single track. If I bring the envelope down a little bit, I can then make one of these, say that one, a longer decay. Oh yeah, that's pretty good. Another section in here is a modulation section here, the LFO and noise. You can send an LFO to whatever you like, of any kind of shape you like. You can also add noise to it, so it's a little bit unruly. Using this little button here, I can highlight what it is I want to send it to. Now all the main parameters, the ones at the top and the ones down here, can all be automated throughout the steps, or individually, as I've already shown you with the lock function on an individual step. But if you want to change something over time, then the easier way to do that is to draw it in over the steps. So for instance, if I want the drive to increase as it goes up, I could do that. If I want to do something with the cutoff, I can do that. If I want to increase the frequency of the LFO, I can do that. So it's enormously powerful. In what you've got in this little sequencer at the bottom, this little step sequencer, you can have per step parameters and sounds, or you can have automated stuff going over the whole thing. And this can be 64 steps. You've got pages of steps here, up to 4 pages. Or you can bring it down to something smaller and just loop around that. Once you've got a pattern you like, you can select it, click copy, select the next pattern, paste, and then adjust it. And then swap between the two. Very groovy. Similarly with the sounds, once you're happy with the sound, you can store that there, go on to the next sound, and make something else. Again, copy and paste if you want to do a variation of something, or just start from scratch. But one of the really cool things is that all the automation that you've done stays. So when you're swapping sounds, it still follows the same automation and other bits and bobs you've stuffed in there. So you're just sort of replacing sounds as opposed to going to a whole new preset. And it becomes clear very quickly that you can build up something pretty interesting without too much bother at all. And this is all purely on the kick track. Not done anything with the bass line yet, this is purely just kick percussion, one channel of it coming out. Other thing to look at is effects. If you press here, you've then got a bunch of effects you can use. With the kick side, you've got distortion, sample and hold, bit reduction, low pass and high pass filters. And you enable it and get stuck in. And if you want to automate any of these, just double click the parameter and you draw it in. There's also an EQ you can enable. There's a little bit of output metering with some compression. And on the output you've also got a delay and a reverb. Now to access the delay and reverb parameters, you hit master here and there here. let's have a look at the bass side of things. It's the same deal really. You've got multiple ways of creating sound, all synthesis based over here, and then a bunch of parameters at the top, modulators at the bottom. Turn off our kick. Let's put in a couple of notes. You've got a pitch line here. It's also worth pointing out that you've got a tuning section here where you can change the root note or the octave. For the bassline side of things, you have 5 different sorts of synthesis, starting off with classic synthesis, which you can hear going from sawtooth to square wave. With pulse width modulation. You also have a second VCO in here, which you can detune. Next you've got a super saw, which is really nice. As you can imagine, that's awesome with the filter. Then you got West Coast. This is Buchla style synthesis, if you like, which means wave folding. And shaping. Then you've got some FM. You've got index here to change the complexity, and you've got the interval, which changes the sort of harmonics. Then modern, which I guess is a sort of a wavetable. I mean, it has warping and it has morphing, so that says to me sort of wavetable-y stuff. There's a filter, of course, and at the bottom you've got envelopes and LFOs. So if you turn the LFO on, select the routing through this little button here, I can start getting things involved. You have an envelope over the amplitude of the sound. You have an auxiliary envelope here, which isn't connected to anything until you make it connected to something. The last section is the modifier section in the middle. This brings in some other forms of modulation, like remodulation, frequency modulation, sine and sample and hold and stuff. Again, you can use the lock function down along here to choose something in order to affect it. Or you can double click it to draw it in. If you like that for a sound, then copy it, select the next sound, paste it in. Then you can make some changes to it. And then, like swapping between sounds on the kick side, you can do that on the bass side. Effects, the same as before. You can add some inserts. You've got a bit of distortion, some unison, which is really nice, flanging and phasing, and similarly you've got the delay and reverb stuff going on, which is accessible down in the same master bus as you were using the kick for. Bring the kick back in. You also have a little timing option as well, where you can add a bit of swing to what's going on. Or a bit of groove. Is groove the opposite to swing? I'm not entirely sure. Now it's interesting that you can scale and tune what's happening in track 01 because it doesn't accept any MIDI input as far as pitch information goes. You can't play the bass, you can't trigger the kick from something else. It only works internally. And that's a bit of a shame because there's an awesome synthesis engine in here which you can only kind of access within itself. I mean, that's awesome. In here, fantastic. I mean, it's a bit like saying, well, you know, you don't have MIDI on a TB303, therefore I can't access the sounds. But of course you can, because you access them within the piece of software that it's designed and within the environment that it's designed to be used with. It's just that the synthesis engine in here is so good that I'd really like to be able to use it in 1,000 other different applications. Because that's a funny thing about the MIDI implementation. I mean, sure, you can map all sorts of things to all sorts of controls. However, you can't play it. And I'd really like to play it. You can't trigger the chord changes either. That's not something which is a function you can access. What happens when you plug in a MIDI keyboard like this? I mean, this one in particular, because it is designed especially to run with the complete keyboards, because it gives you lots of lovely colours. But what it does is it maps the sounds across the keyboard and the patterns. You've got 8 sounds across one octave, 8 patterns across another, 8 sounds for the bass, and 8 patterns for the bass. And then you can go to town swapping between patterns and swapping between sounds in a fantastic performance, you know, crowd goes crazy kind of way. And that's phenomenal. That's a lot of fun, but I'd really quite like it if I could just nudge up a MIDI channel and then access it as a synthesizer. But you can't. It is what it is what I'm trying to say. But the thing with that is that it's bloody awesome what it is. Track 01 all by itself has this sort of intoxicating way of pulling you in to the idea that just a simple kick drum and a bass line is pretty much all you need. And as you start working with it, as you start manipulating it, as you start adding in different sounds and swapping between them, doing that kind of automation per step, as well as automation cutting its way through, it just reveals all sorts of textures, all sorts of possibilities, all sorts of way of twisting it and manipulating it to make a track all by itself. I mean, it's only track 01. I mean, what on earth is track 02 going to be like? Because what's interesting about limitations, it's like with the modular, you're putting constraints upon yourself, and it's within those boundaries that the creativity really starts to emerge. And track 01 is like that. It's not like that, but it's like that. It's restrictive. It's making you work. It's making you think. It's making you consider how you can use those two layers together most effectively. It's making you think about the timbres of your sound, the tones, the way they are moving with each other. There's a really helpful effect in here, which is ducking. It's essentially like side chaining something so that when the kick comes in, the bass drops a little bit and then comes back in again. And that allows you to fit these two kind of beefy bottom end things together without too much trouble. It doesn't get mushy. It just continues to sound awesome. And that's the thing. It sounds awesome. I mean, the first time I got it, I lost an hour almost instantly just fiddling. Didn't know what I was doing. I didn't open the manual or anything. I just started playing with knobs and bits and pieces. You're just going, yeah, and it starts putting that little smile across your face and you're going, yeah, I'm a techno wizard. This is awesome. And the presets in here, I mean, you can just go from crazy to crazy, and all of it is really good. It makes you think, oh, I haven't even scratched the surface yet, because, I mean, listen to this. And obviously I'm going to start playing with a filter. And I might stick in a couple of beats of my own. And it's all contained within this one little simple piece of software. Now, of course, 2 tracks of stuff, that's not a lot. You could probably build much bigger things, and you could use multiple instances of this within your DAW to layer up other bits of percussion, all running in sync to each other through these patterned sequences. You know, that's completely possible. You can open it up as far as you like. That's the beauty of a computer-based sound-making device. But what I really like about track 01 is how it just pulls you into this single environment, this one place, just dealing with a kick, just dealing with a bass line, and then twisting that and modifying and subverting that into doing other things for you. It's brilliant. I love it. I love it like I do sort of Rebirth. Remember Rebirth RB338 from Propellerheads back in the day, where you had 2 303s and an 808 drum machine? That was all you had, but within there you could create the most amazing sounds. Now, track 01 doesn't quite have the versatility of the drum machine, but it has a far more comprehensive sound set. You've got full-on synthesis going on in here to allow you to craft together that kick sound. Similarly with the bass sound, you've got 5 different types of synthesis all competing for your attention, all of which are fabulous in their own right, with just enough parameters to tweak and to fold and to stretch and to shape and to modulate and to oscillate in exciting and interesting ways. And I just get to that end and I think, oh, I would just love to play it. I'd love to use that more. I'd like to take that bass line out and just use it by itself. I mean, maybe it's already available in some other Native Instruments instrument. I don't know. Or maybe it will become available in some new Native Instruments instrument. I mean, when you look at this, you've got to think that there's places they could go, like, for instance, the tuning at the top. Well, you can change the tuning, that's great, but there should be a way that you can automate that so it can change between different chords. There should be some kind of song mode that you could put together. I mean, you can perform it within your DAW and record the output. You can record the output within Reactor and just go to town and record it in a performance mode. But there isn't at the moment a way of chaining together patterns. I mean, if they were to allow you to get MIDI in there to play stuff, I think that would be really interesting. MIDI to control the scaling and the routings and the patterns. That would be very interesting. I mean, you can already sequence the pattern order in your DAW, so maybe that's the same as a song thing. Yeah, maybe it is. So there's acres of places where this could go. I mean, one thing that's missing at the moment is you have no automation over the parameters in the middle section. So for instance, it might be nice to be able to modulate through the different samples. So rather than having a sample and swapping between layer A and layer B, on layer A, I would like to be able to go through those samples so that each different step could be a different sample. Can you do that? No, I don't believe you can. And there are other parameters in here like start and end point that would also be interesting to modulate and to automate and to manipulate and to get stuck in there with. So there's a whole bundle of fun packed into here, and there's also a load of stuff that they could do if they wanted to go to track 2 or track 8. I don't know, is this the beginning of something? Is this a thing all by itself? I'm not sure. But all I know is that this is a heck of a load of fun on its own. I mean, it's perfect as well for the Surface. I mean, awesome. I mean, once you've scaled it, because it starts off, you know, pretty small on your high-res screen, but if you scale it up a little bit so it's full screen like this, it's beautiful to work with. It's a shame that Native Instruments doesn't yet support more than one finger at a time, but it's so damn easy to use without being restricted to a mouse, because it means that I can sort of get in there and look at things and focus things and move things on the screen, yeah, like people do with those iPad thingamajiggies. But I can do it with Reactor on a proper desktop computer that's also touchable. It's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. The question now, of course, will be, will it run on the new Surface Go? Well, who knows, but you can rest assured that I will try that out once that thing appears. So look forward to a future video on all the performance of the new Surface Go. But otherwise, I think that'll do. Track 01. It's a blast. You can just run a whole party from it without any bother at all. It's completely self-contained. Don't worry about getting MIDI in. Don't worry about getting MIDI out. I mean, that would be interesting, wouldn't it? To be able to take the step sequencer and run that through some other stuff as well. But no, I don't think any of that's going to happen. Just treat it as a standalone, in your face, melt your ears off, have a load of fun, twiddle about, automate, steps and locks and bits and things, kind of 2-channel groove machine. So that was fun. Thanks for that, Native Instruments. And in the meantime, go and make some tunes.